And that brings me to Nancy Pelosi in reference to Israel and Gaza. Something strange happened. Something is rotten in Denmark. Because believe it or not, apparently there have been a coalition of politicians in DC that have actually been pushing to pause aid to Israel. And I use that word pause because this is not something that they want to last indefinitely. This is just for a certain period of time. So just keep that in mind. And one of those people that actually signed that letter, believe it or not, is Nancy Pelosi. I kid you not. Let's dive in to this clip here. Shout out to Case Study QB for this clip. You're out here doing the damn thing. Here we go.
President Biden had a phone call with Prime Minister Netanyahu last week. He expressed real unhappiness with how the war is being conducted in Gaza. I know a number of Democrats have done the same, particularly after that strike that killed those humanitarian workers. The Prime Minister yesterday said, look, I'm setting a date for a Rafah invasion. That's still going to go ahead. He didn't say when that would be. You are among those who have said aid to Israel, military aid to Israel should be conditioned. Explain to us what you mean, what conditions and why.
Well, let me be very specific. The letter was about the attack on the
aid workers.
The workers. It's
pause. Everybody pay attention to what she just said. And there's a reason why she said that. Nancy Pelosi also supports AIPAC. There's videos of her at AIPAC conventions. So what she is doing there is Nancy Pelosi is making it very clear that she's calling for a pause of funding Israel, not because of the assault on the Palestinians in Gaza, but because of those humanitarian aid workers that were killed. So do you see how she's making that distinction? And that's to make sure that Nancy Pelosi gets to continue her relationship with the Israeli lobby. So she's trying to have it both ways. I told you Bernie Sanders is doing this song and dance too. They're trying to have it both ways. So they're not going to come out and say, we are no longer supporting the state of Israel. She still supports the state of Israel. She just wants some type of accountability for a short period of time because of the humanitarian aid workers. And again, what this shows you is that when we talk about prioritizing certain people, once again, Israelis and now the humanitarian aid workers are prioritized over the Palestinian people. The Palestinian people are never prioritized by the U.S. government. They're never put first. Nancy thinks she's slick.
Said until there is an investigation. And they said they were doing an investigation. Now, I think the investigation should be an independent one. And I said that early on, and Secretary Blinken said that, Jose Andres said that. It should be an independent one. But nonetheless, that letter said there should be an investigation. It didn't enlarge the issue to everything else. Now, you have to know that we have the Leahy language in the law, which says that if we give you assistance, as we do give to Israel, you cannot interfere with our giving humanitarian assistance. So there's some conversation that will be had about this in the Senate and in the House. It's really such a tragedy. Look, October 7th was barbaric. It was horrible what they did to the Israeli people and the rest. Hamas is a terrorist organization. We need.
See how she has to come in and say that again? That's her proving her point that she still supports the state of Israel. Yes, I signed that letter, but that letter was in reference to the humanitarian aid workers, not in reference to the Palestinians. It's so brutal. Notice they use the words brutal. So brutal what happened on October 7th to the Israelis, but it's not brutal what's been happening to the Palestinian people over the years. I don't know if she had a drink before this interview either.
Need to free the hostages, all of the hostages. But nearly 33,000 people dying, people starving, hydration, famine, and the rest. There has to be a better way.
Mika?
And so, Madam Speaker, on that note, what are some of the opportunities or options for President Biden in terms of trying to forge a better path here? It seems Bibi Netanyahu is really dug in on a number of things. Do you think that conditions on aid should be put in place? And if they are put in place, what would they be?
Well, I've not been a fan of having conditions on aid to Israel. We give Israel the aid we give them because it's in our national security issue.
You guys hear this? Let's go back just a little bit. Watch how nervous she gets when she brings up the idea of conditioning aid.
If they are put in place, what would they be?
Well, I've not been a fan of having conditions on aid to Israel. We give Israel the aid we give them because it's in our national security issue interest to do so, and that has been our tradition. But I do
pause. You give Israel the aid that you give them because you're bought. It's not even about national security interests. It's because you guys, all of you guys have been bought by the Israeli lobby. Even if you didn't take money from them as a part of your campaign, you went into parties that did. Democratic Party and the Republican Party. That's why you give Israel that money, because of organizations like AIPAC, because of organizations like J Street, not necessarily no national security interests. You guys are bought and paid for. Of course, she's not going to say that on national television. And of course, Mika from Morning Joe is not going to push back on her using the rhetoric that I just did. If she were going to do that, Nancy Pelosi wouldn't be sitting there in the first place.
The president has not said if they cross the red line in Rafah what he would do. But I'll tell you what he has been doing. And people should know this, and especially try to say this to all the people in front of my house in the middle of the night and the rest. The president has been advocating for humanitarian assistance to the Palestinians. The Republicans in the House of Representatives have held it up.
Pause. You guys see how she pulls out this old trick in the playbook? The people who are protesting outside your house, Nancy Pelosi, the people that you called like Putin puppets, those people are calling for a permanent ceasefire and self-determination for the Palestinian people. Nancy is trying to make this just about humanitarian aid. Those people are asking for you to stop the slaughter of the Palestinian people and to stop giving Israel the weapons that allow them to do so. But she just brings it back to the humanitarian aid so that way she can point and blame the Republicans for that not passing. What does that have to do with the Israeli government preventing the aid that was already being brought in from getting to the Palestinian people in the first place? And we'll bring up the Flower Massacre investigation that has been debunked recently by CNN. CNN did their own investigation and found that Israel has lied. Surprise, surprise. So the Republicans have nothing to do with the fact that Israel was not allowing the humanitarian aid to get into Gaza to the Palestinian people, that Israelis were blocking off the roads, preventing the trucks from getting in, that IDF soldiers were taking aid off the trucks and setting it on fire and videotaping themselves doing it. That has nothing to do with the Republican Party. But this is all they know how to do, is to continue to play partisan politics. She got to blame someone instead of blaming Joe Biden and blaming her damn self. So they point to the other party. This is the problem with partisan politics.
And yet, to hear these people go out there and say, oh, genocide, Joe, all that, not to repeat what they said, but nonetheless, he's the one who's been advocating for it. The House of Representatives has held that up, as you know. But in addition to that, one of the plans that they put forth to give aid to Ukraine has no humanitarian assistance.
We don't need to bring Ukraine into this subject. Okay? You've given billions to Ukraine. Leave Zelensky and Ukraine out of this conversation. We are talking about what is happening to the Palestinian people right now. I don't think it's fair to make that same comparison. They are not in the same situation. We're talking about people that have been historically oppressed and occupied. We're talking about people that have been treated by like animals, while the government that is treating them this way, they're living just fine in Israel. Everybody's got health care, free college education, things we don't even have in our own damn country. We're talking about a group, a state that is in power over those people who have no power. The Israeli government has a military. The Palestinian people don't have a military. And so when people say, oh, well, Hamas is terrorist, so dangerous, and da-da-da, they have no military. Without the occupation, without the oppression, without the sense of, dignity, you don't end up with Hamas. So I don't know what is happening here with Nancy Pelosi, but honey, nobody is buying your lies. It is very obvious. We know what is happening and we know who's making the damn decisions. And yes, we do call him Genocide Joe because he sends the money. He sends the weapons. It's blood on his hands. And I know, Nancy, it's your job to defend him and stand up for him so that you can keep your seat. We got to start asking questions. Why hasn't Nancy Pelosi gone ahead and retired? Saving that seat and keeping it warm for your daughter. So you got to go on all these different news stations and defend senile Genocide Joe. And then you're upset because people are protesting outside your house. Forget your house. People should have been protesting outside your house, Nancy, while your district has all these homeless people out on the damn street and you got a nice old fancy house.
So there has to be some recognition of what is holding up this assistance to the Palestinians, because humanity, as Jose keeps saying, we've got to support humanity in all of this. So I can't really answer that except to say what our law is, that if we give you assistance, you cannot interfere with our giving humanitarian assistance for the same geographic area. I would hope that Netanyahu, he's only interested in his own political survival. Does that sound familiar? And that's just the way it's been. It's a tragedy. Netanyahu is a tragedy. We all love Israel. We want Israel to be able to defend itself.
See, there it is. Let me continue to kiss up to the state of Israel because I gotta still have that support from AIPAC. I can't let them down.
But also to maintain its the respected commands in the world. I don't think he's in furtherance of that. I think that Chuck Schumer was right when he said there should be an election.
So people are still protesting against Nancy Pelosi. We got to give a shout out to students at Arizona State University. There was actually a talk by Nancy Pelosi, and she was there. And of course, she was met with protest.
Nancy Pelosi, you are complicit in genocide. The blood of over 15,000 Palestinian babies is on your hands. How can you be a Democrat and say you hold democratic values while over 100,000 innocent Palestinian civilians have been massacred with bombs that you paid for? We will not be shamed into voting for you or Genocide Joe and your massacreist policies. My family back home in Palestine is being killed. Their blood is on your hands. And David Axelrod, shame on you and every one of the Democratic elites that want to shame us for voting for Genocide Joe. 80% of Democrats support a ceasefire. Shame on you! Shame on you! Nancy Pelosi, you are complicit in genocide. The blood of over 15,000 Palestinian babies is on your hands. How can you be a Democrat and say you hold democratic values while over 100,000 innocent Palestinian civilians have been massacred with bombs that you paid for? We will not be shamed into voting.
So here's Nancy Pelosi here. And the guy sitting next to her, I wanted to pause this because I wanted you to see that's David Axelrod. Remember, he was one of Obama's advisors. So here we have like the hoity-toity elite club, the club of the elite, Miss Ice Cream Freezer herself, Nancy Pelosi, and David Axelrod. And these people have been making decisions that have put that gentleman who stood up to speak, he's also Palestinian, that have put his family in jeopardy and at risk. These people, they have every right to be interrupted. They have every right to be confronted, because they're the ones that are voting on the legislation that allows these things to pass and happen in the first damn place. Meanwhile, Nancy Pelosi can go back home to her fridge or her freezer of ice cream. So they have to drag him out, you know?
For you or Genocide Joe and your massacreist policies, my family back home in Palestine is being killed. Their blood is on your hands. And David Axelrod, shame on you and every one of the Democratic elite that want to shame us for voting for Genocide Joe. 80% of Democrats support a ceasefire. Shame on you. Shame on you. Nancy.
And I'm sorry, but, you know, again, he has every right to say what he said, because the thing is this: politicians have to be held accountable. They're not just owed their seat. See, part of the problem is people like Nancy Pelosi, they've been in these seats for so damn long. They're not used to being confronted. They're not used to being challenged. They're not used to people coming up to them and ask them to do their damn job the right way. They became comfortable. And this is why I always continue to say that these politicians are not going to save you. We all have to come to a clear understanding about this. Once these people get in there, going into these two parties, the parties are already owned. They're already corporate. They're already controlled. You think you'll be the one to go in there and make a change, but they're going to hush you up, or they're going to kick you out if you don't go with the flow. Nancy Pelosi realized that a long time ago, and she decided to go with the flow. She looks like an absolute clown, having to get up there and defend Joe Biden, who can barely talk himself, against people calling him Genocide Joe. Well, that's what you are. That's what he is. That's Joe Biden's legacy. Joe Biden's legacy is Crime Bill Joe. I don't want my kids to grow up in a racial jungle, telling Anita Hill to be quiet and not allowing her witnesses to testify, calling Obama he's well-spoken and clean, and now genocide. That's his legacy. And honestly, if the Democratic Party should be absolutely embarrassed. They should be embarrassed. How do you go from Donald Trump's presidency, which a lot of people were pissed about? How do you go from that to Democrat politicians being called out, called Genocide Joe and all these things? How do you get worse than that? We can go to the next set when you're ready, Eric. Think about that, ladies and gentlemen. There's just no excuse. There's no excuse for this, because what these two presidential terms have shown people is this. Every time you say, we'll switch over to the next party and it'll be better. And what these two have shown you is that actually both of these parties are corporate and corrupt. Let's go to some of the comments here. Thank you for the super chat, Ed. Don't pause aid. Stop all aid permanently. We should demand Israel pay us taxpayers all the aid back. Well said, Edward. Thank you, sir. Bikes a lot day. Chris Hedges said that the World Central Kitchen is there to replace the UN Relief Organization. Yeah, Chris Hedges will be here Sunday. That is one of the things I wanted to talk to him about as well. Thank you, Troy. These people's souls are in big trouble. Yes, sir.